get on one time he had been watching on TV, that White Shoes Johnson guy who was, I think, the first guy that started really tooting his own horn on the field, after he'd scored or something. And he'd hold that ball up and dance around a little bit in the end zone. Of course, that's mild compared to some of the things they do now. But this junior high kid that I had, and he was a big fullback play for me. We were playing, I think, riser. And he burst off tackle and went about 50 yards for a touchdown. Okay? Well, as soon as he hit that just about in the end zone, he slows down about on the 10-yard line and starts dancing with that ball in the air. Didn't see that safety coming across. And that safety separated him from the goal line and that ball. And you know how I felt about that, don't you, Joe Ellis? It wasn't you, but Skeeter, you was right. I got upset, folks, because that was just a little bit of haughty pride. And I set him on the bench. And I sent somebody else in and let them score. Well, he sat on the bench for about a quarter. He kept looking at me, and I mean, he was one of the best running backs I had, but I set him on that bench. And he finally, at about a little bit before halftime, I looked over at him, and he had his helmet and boy, he ran up here to me, and I said, Randy, I said, do you think you know how to handle it better when you fix to score next time? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I said, well, go back over and sit down a little bit longer. Well, I could have poured cold water and got a better reaction. And I'll think about it a little more. Well, I waited till the second half before I put him back in. And I said, you ready to do what you know to do and quit acting foolish out there? Yes, sir. Well, first play I called was for him off tackle again. He burst another 50 yards. And buddy, just when we had it on film, just before he went to that end zone, he took his arm and flew across that football. Wasn't nobody going to get that football out of his arms. So, haughty pride in athletics can do you in eventually. Ain't it, Coach? We have a coach sitting out there in that blue shirt nodding his head, was coached with me a while, and Skeeter knows it. It can do you in, haughty pride. But anyway, the main thing that I wanted to bring up, I'll take this, and that was just a prelude to some things, but the first thing that I want to touch on that's in the Bible, I'm going to put my glasses on to see it like this now. First time I put glasses on to see what I was missing was in junior high, and I was assistant principal and got up in front of about 5,000 kids, and I said, y'all think you see something y'all ain't never seen before. And boy, I looked. And I reached and got my glasses and put them on. Because I just couldn't read anymore up close. So, but anyway, the first thing I want to touch on, if you got your Bible with you, you can follow along with me on this, and my brother back there is going to put it up on the screen, is God's a track coach. Can you hear me? Coach Mike, he's a track coach. How do you know that, Coach? Because if you will look in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 24, and this is what it says. Everybody ready? Got some flags out there that folks can throw if I mess up. So you can see a red flag go up sometimes. Okay. Striving for a crown. Do you know that those who run in a race, they all run, but one receives the prize. Run in such a way that you may obtain it. In other words, you've got to obey the rules. God says you have to obey the rules. You can't run a cross-country race, can you, Coach, and cut out across a field and come out about a mile ahead of everybody because you took a shortcut. There's no shortcuts, folks. The race must be run like God says it needs to be run. Amen. Everybody is getting that, okay? The next thing is Hebrews. Hebrews 12. Hebrews 12:1. And Hebrews 12:1 says this: the race of faith. Therefore, we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily encompasses us, and run with endurance. This is not a sprint that we're in, folks. This is not a sprint. It's an endurance race. Some of us have been running it longer than others. All you young folks, you're just beginning your race. But it says here, run this race with endurance, the race that has been set before you. Your race. Everybody's got a different path to run. But run it like God lays it out for you, and you will complete it. And the next one is 2 Timothy. 2 Timothy. You can see me on the board back here. I imagine it beat me to it. These little tags are hard to see even with my glasses.
Read it from the board.
Okay. Timothy 4. 2 Timothy, excuse me. 2 Timothy 4, verse 7. Everybody got it? I ain't seen no red flags yet. I must be on that. Good. Okay. I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith.
Amen.
That's what God is asking you. Okay? Give you a quick example of being in a race, and it's a distance race. It was several years ago that Coach Skeeter Boyd, who's sitting back there, knows I'm telling the truth out of here, and I won't tell anything else out of this pulpit except the truth. He and I were entered in a 5K race at ULM or NLU or whichever one it was, but it might have been Northeast back then, it was so long ago. But we had entered it, and Skeeter, about 2 months before this, had had 2 heart attacks and some stents put in. This is Mr. Boyd, okay, and he and I coached together for years. And he wanted to enter that race because he wanted to start building his, he'd been doing some running and building his heart back up. And so we did. And we took off, and it was not a big fast pace. I could have run it faster, but I'm trying to keep right there with my friend. You know, I'm in pretty good shape. I'm ready to go. But Skeets had 2 heart attacks. So we get all around the track there and get all the way headed back. And we're about 200 yards, I guess, from the finish line. And we had been running so slow, there was a lady that looked like she was about 90. She had run past us several things we got before, several, distance before, and she was ahead of us. And about 200 yards to go, all of a sudden, Coach Boyd threw it in high gear. I mean, he took off sprinting. Caught me by surprise, and he is a pretty good sprinter. And he beat me to the finish line. And I've been trotting along waiting for him the whole race. Okay? You gotta watch out who you're running against. But we had a great time, and Skeet and I are reveling and laughing at each other in that thing. You know, it was just really funny, but it's an endurance race. It is an endurance race. Life is an endurance race, guys. Some of us have been running it a little bit longer than others, but we still have to run by the rules. Okay, the next one that I wanted to touch on, I helped coach the West MONROE boxing team for about 38 years. And you say, Coach, well, what, boxing is in the Bible? It sure is. It sure is. God's a boxing coach. And I'll give you an example of that. In 1 Corinthians, 9, chapter 9, verse 26. And this is what it says. Therefore, I run thus, but with uncertainty. Thus I fight, not as one who beats the air. You know what beating the air is? In boxing at the club, first thing we teach a young person that wants to learn how to box is to get over there and get to one of the lights behind him and box that shadow that's standing in front of you. It's going to be just as fast as you are. That's called what? Shadow boxing. It's in the Bible. So God's a boxing coach. Now the next one, I think, is one of God's favorite sports, because he talks about it a lot. And it is found in Genesis, the book of Genesis, the 32nd chapter, 32nd chapter. Everybody got that? I haven't seen no flags go up yet. I must not be going too fast or too slow. 32nd chapter and verses 22 through 31. Okay, 22 through 31. And he arose that night and took his... Wait a minute, that's wrong.
That's right.
Right.
Is it right?
That's right.
Right.
22 through 31. And he rose that night and took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed over the ford of Lord. And he took them, sent them over the brook, and sent over what he had. Then Jacob, y'all remember Jacob? This is what happened to Jacob there at that brook. Then Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the breaking of day. Now when he saw that he did not prevail against him, he touched the socket of his hip, of Jacob's hip. And the socket of Jacob's hip was out of joint as he wrestled with him. And he said, is that 25? And he said to him, what is your name? And he said, Jacob. And he said, your name shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel. So the nation of Israel was named after. For you have wrestled, struggled with God and with men, and have prevailed. Jacob wrestled with an angel. Ephesians 6. Ephesians 6.
Ten.
10 and 12. No red flags yet, huh? Hold on to them. Boy, I wish they'd have held on to some flags in some of the games they had in the Super Bowl. I don't get any objections to that either. Okay. 6, 10, and 12. This is what they say. This is what the Word says. Finally, my brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the power of His might. Put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this age, against spiritual hosts of wickedness in heavenly places. Does that fit today's scenario?
Amen.
That is very prevalent today. A lot of things like that are going on. Does not look too good sometimes. The powerlifting, I just touched on that. I had a young man, some of y'all know him probably, Dr. Dunn, Dr. Butch Dunn. He powerlifted for me at Washita. I started him out in the 6th grade, and first thing he ever said when I was taking him through what they were going to be doing, he looked at the squats, and he said, I'm going to be the strongest man in the world at that one there. He said that as a 6th grader. Well, make a long story short, he wound up representing the United States years later. Years later, he wound up lifting in the Soviet Union in Moscow. And I got a phone call. I knew he was going over there. I'd been hearing about it. And I got a phone call in my office at Washita. And the secretary said, Coach, says this, somebody on the phone from Moscow wants to speak to you. Boy, they could have probably put me in jail for Russian collusion, they thought. But anyway, I knew who it was, got on. He said, Coach, I did it. I set the world record. But he gave an example of what had happened to him. He had got down to his last 2 lifts, and he was going to lift that first one, 10 pounds under the world title. And in his last lift, he was going to lift 10 pounds over it. Well, on his second, that lift that he took under it, that 10 pounds under, he said, Coach, I started up with that weight, and I felt something give in my body. And he said, I almost lost it. He said, but I locked it out, but I couldn't walk. They had to help me off the platform. And they helped me over to the bleacher, and they said, you're the last one lifting, you're going for a world record, we're going to give you 10 minutes. Well, Butch shared this with me, what happened. He said, Coach, I remembered something you told me, that when you're fixing to do something magnificent, ask for magnificent help. And he said, I struggled around the side of the bleachers and crawled under the bleachers and lay prone on my face. And I said, Lord, you gave me the strength to do this. Now please, Lord, let me do it without any pain. And he said, immediately I felt this, something lift off of me. And he came back out, walked up on that platform, got under those weights, went down with 10 pounds over the world record. Boom, locked it out. You got to lock it out all the way to get it count. He locked it out. And then he said, Coach, I could have broke the world record by 20 pounds. He said, I felt strength like I've never before felt it. Is that the power of God, folks?
Amen.
In athletics, if it's used right. If it's used right. And I know, how much time I got, Coach? Nobody's ready to throw a flag real quick? Well,
Read the next one.
I will, I thought I saw one. I don't know how many of y'all have heard about me wrestling a bear, but I wrestled a bear one time, and there was 8 of us, and we were all put up on a stage at Sterlington High School because it was to raise some money. Coach Barky McDuffie was the one that asked me to come and wrestle. He said, Coach, you taught us everything, even wrestling. And I said, yeah, but I said, how many of us are going to wrestle this thing? And he said, 8 of us. And I said, we all going to jump on him at the same time? And he said, no, one at a time. I okayed, and I was the oldest guy there. I was 40-something years old. The rest of them young guys. And we were all up on the stage, and they brought this thing out in the middle of the basketball court, and there were 2,000 people packed in that place. Radio stations, TV stations, and when they lined us up along the side, they came by with a microphone, and everybody was bragging, oh, what you going to do with this bear? Man, I'm gonna throw him on his head. I'm going to do this. I'm going to see this bear, he's going down tonight. Well, they got to me, and I was the 8th person. And I said, by the grace of God, I may survive this thing. That's what I said. Because I wasn't fixed to get in that haughty pride thing. I done had enough of that. Well, I watched from the stage behind the curtain, all those people out watching to get drawn to see who was going to wrestle in the order of who came up. And I was the 6th person. In other words, there were 2 after me, but there were those ahead of me. And I watched that bear, and it was one guy who was 6'8", 400 pounds. That's a pretty big guy, you know. When that whistle blew, that bear was on him before he could move. He grabbed him and body slammed him and put one paw in the middle of his chest and looked around as if to say, is this the best you got? Man, I got over here inside and got on my face and started praying, folks. Lord, help me. I done got myself into something. Well, the Lord began to speak to me. And he said, son, what is your coaching thing that says the best the best defense is what? Some of y'all even know that. The best defense is a good what? Offense. Well, you know what that told me? Oh my gosh, I'm going to have to jump on that thing. I can't wait for him to jump on me. And so that's what I got out there, and I got down in my stance, and my wrestling stance, and of course this thing was out there on all fours, rocking back and forth, looking at me like a blown-up whistle. I watched that trainer of his, and he'd get the crowd stoked up, kind of like Hulk Hogan would, and then he'd reach for that whistle and blow it. Well, when he got the crowd stoked up and he went for that to get that whistle, I took off with the thing and I hit that bear right in the side of my head. Boom! And I threw one arm over him, and about that time the whistle blew. jumped on something you wish you could get off of it? That thing went berserk. I mean, he was everywhere whirling. I got a good handful of hair, and my wife can tell you, I've got that hair in a picture at the house that I pulled out of his head or his back. And I went round and round, him trying to get me, my feet went off the floor. And finally he stopped and he started shaking like I was a flea on his back. But I'd done tried a half Nelson. I couldn't even get my arm up there to where it would be around his neck. And then I was going to try to pick up one of his back legs and take one off so I could try to knock him over. And he just leaned into me. It was like he'd taken wrestling lessons. And I said, Lord, how am I going to beat this thing? And the Lord said, keep on outthinking him, son. I gave you intelligence. I gave him strength. Keep on outthinking him. So I helicoptered on him, which put you back, and I spun to the other side and tried it and got the same results. And I spun back on this side, him trying to get me the whole time. And all of a sudden, Coach Mack, the whistle blew. Well, guess what? That bear was trained to attack you on the whistle. He was also trained to quit on the whistle. And when that whistle blew, that bear went docile again. Man, I jumped back off and I looked up and I said, thank you, God. They got that all on film at KNOE TV. But that was just an example of wrestling. I know y'all know powerlifting. Samson was pretty good at it. He took the temple walls down with his strength. That's pretty good stuff. I think he's probably the strongest powerlifter that ever walked. But anyway, I got through it, Steve. Brother Willard, y'all make me feel good when I get up here because I don't have no fears of what I'm fixing to say. Because I know I'm telling it like it is. And sometimes the Word of God can be interesting, folks. It all mounts up, though, to listening to the Word and doing what it says.
Amen.
And you will be a champion yourself then. Listen to God. All of you hear from Him. You may not know His voice as good as somebody older that's been listening, but when you're in your quiet time, listen. God wants to speak to each and every one of you. And it may be, I hope, you may be, I think they outlawed bear wrestling in the state of Louisiana because they said I put too much of a hurt on them or something. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway, you could be a master. Brother Dwayne back there drives a huge